My TV decided to just turn on. I assume a cat did it. Hold.
I love that a cat turned on your TV. Hello, and welcome to another episode of AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who like to dive a layer deeper into the music. So lean in close, turn up your volume, because class is in session. We're your hosts. I'm Monsi.
I'm Jen.
And I'm Jody.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift.
Hello, and welcome to another very special episode of AP Taylor Swift in honor of April Fool's Day this week, the spirit of jokes, the spirit of humor. This week, we are going to do a very special episode where we are going to chat about some of Taylor Swift's joke songs. She's a great writer, she is an incredible performer, but she has done some songs over the years that are more humorous or intentionally jokey. And so we're going to talk about those today, which is going to be super fun. I was already being mocked about this before we started recording, but I did want to talk for a brief moment about why do we think things are funny? Because I think it's really interesting. Well, if you want to be a nerd like me, I'm going to link something in the show notes. It's an article titled "What's So Funny? The Science of Why We Laugh" by Giovanni Sabato from, I think, American Scientific Journal. And it's a very accessible article and has like the whole history of people trying to figure out why things are funny. What I think is the most interesting is we don't really know. We have some theories, but there's still a whole lot to it, that there's something core to the human experience of laughter, of humor, that we like can't comprehend. And I think there's something really magical about that. But one of the most common theories is the idea of benign violation. So it's the idea of like something is happening that's like violating social norms, but it's benign. It's not harmful. So then it's funny. An example, I was trying to think of a good example, and I was at a sports event this weekend and there was a mascot, and I was like, oh, this is a great example of benign violation. A sports mascot can go up to like a security guard and try to like challenge them to a dance contest. It's hilarious. It's a violation. You're not supposed to talk to security guards, but it's benign because it's the mascot. We all know that mascots are okay to do that. They're allowed to do that. But if a mascot like ran into the middle of the court and like actually harmed a player, that's a violation, but that's not benign. So that wouldn't be funny. That would be concerning. And it also speaks to a little bit of why humor is so personal and so subjective, because what I find benign, not everyone else will find benign. So that's why some people find some things funny and some things don't. And people talk about, I mean, there's so much about this, but I think that's a really interesting concept of, well, why does someone think it's funny and I don't think it's funny? Most likely you guys have a different definition of what is benign, which might tell you something about both of you. So I'll link to it. I won't get into it anymore, but we have picked 3 songs that Taylor has definitely done in a humorous manner, and we're going to go through them and why they're funny. I think, Monzi, you're kicking us off?
Yes, I am. I'm actually going to be taking us back to 2008. But before I get right into that, I actually also have a nerdy reading related to humor. And there was a paper that I read in school called The Anatomy of a Gag, written by Václav Havel. And it basically talks about how you construct something funny. And one of the key things in there is juxtaposing an event with something completely out of left field, something totally unexpected. So the example that they give is in Charlie Chaplin, for example. Somebody tells Chaplin his wife has died, and he turns around and his shoulders are shaking and you think he's crying, but secretly he's actually shaking a martini, and he like turns around and he like makes a drink and he's like drinking it to celebrate the fact that his wife has died. And it's funny because it's kind of like silly humor because you expect him to be sad, but really he's celebrating. So my first song is kind of related to the song that I picked, which is an old classic from 2008. If you recall Taylor Swift and T-Pain's collaboration, Thug Story. If you don't recall it, I highly recommend doing a quick YouTube search. We'll obviously link it in the show notes. But it was actually done, I believe, for the CMT Awards as this ad hoc moment of these two coming together. If I remember, it was T Swizzle and T Pizzle was the intro of the two artists in this song. Obviously a play on Taylor Swift's Love Story song, but it was an entirely rap track and therefore called Thug Story. Taylor Swift is not a bad rapper, as we know today and have seen through her various experimental music styles. But this song was kind of the first time good girl Taylor, who is right at the beginning of her career and just making a name for herself, isn't really known to too many people, comes out with T-Pain, who was all the rage at that moment in time, and does something incredibly unexpected, totally unlike her. It's not just a T-Pain feature on a Taylor Swift song. It's Taylor Swift full on rapping with a big baseball cap and chains and all the thug embellishments.
She would have been like 19, right? Like she was still like kind
Yes,
of baby face Taylor, if I
yes.
recall.
Young Taylor,
Yeah.
incredibly skinny, blonde, country twang and all.
This would have been, like, right after Fearless came out,
Yeah,
if
and
it's a parody of Love Story.
what I think is hilarious is that she does stay true and keep the country twang the whole time she's rapping. So it's real commitment, Taylor. The lyrics, I'm not gonna like really go into them because there are a lot of them. It's a rap song, but they're really funny. Just to give you like a really quick taste in case you're not familiar with this, it starts off, I'm like 8'4", blonde hair to the floor. You shorties never thought, and I dreamed about rapping hardcore. No, I ain't got a gun. No, I never really been in a club. Still live with my parents, but I'm still a thug. And it continues through various verses. 2008, this song is really a product of its time. 2008, and generally the time between 2005 and 2015 was an unfortunate moment in our history where everyone wanted to be thug. And I say unfortunate not because being a thug is unfortunate. It was unfortunate because we really thought we were cool enough to pull it off. Like every kid I knew in school was like, rapping and saying words we should not be saying and dressing in ways we probably shouldn't be dressing. And it was just such a moment of time. And here we have something really unexpected. Taylor Swift was country music's darling new face, young, blonde, clean, and rapping and just being quote unquote thug was so hilarious. But also, it was a pretty accurate representation of just every white and generally non-black kid in school. All of us were doing the same thing. Everyone that age was like very much trying to be in this culture, and we'd rap along the lyrics and just think that you could be a part of that culture because that's just what the time was.
Well, and I think it's kind of the benign violation, the fact that she did this with T-Pain. So it wasn't, if she had done this on her own, I think it would have been probably kind of offensive. Like it would have
Yeah, it
been
would have
like,
been mocking.
yeah, mocking is a really good word. But to do this with someone who was a successful rapper, who was clearly like in on the joke, they thought it was funny together. That's what kind of makes it more into this like, oh, this is funny. This isn't like white girl doesn't know her boundaries, you know?
Well, and it was very, I keep saying of the time because, this is the era in which Justin Bieber collaborated with Ludacris and, in an incredibly fun track, Baby. And there were so many collabs like this happening kind of all over the place. This idea that this new generation of kids, like younger millennials at the time, were really entrenched, I guess, in hip hop culture, like really just like a part of what was happening. The auto tune culture, if you will, it was kind of everywhere.
It's kind of a parody of, and we talked about parody in our satire episode, episode 19, which we'll link in the show notes, but this is really a parody of, to your point, Monty, like white pop stars trying to become rappers or hip hop artists, because we know that Taylor is doing this humorously and
Yes,
very tongue in cheek and is not trying to be intentional. But to your point, there were
real
artists
people who were.
and people in general who were intentionally trying to enter this space or appropriate this culture or this music, this style. And so this is very much parodying that experience.
Yeah, and I think it was also at the same time highlighting her good girl image by
Yes,
contrasting it. It
correct.
almost re-emphasized the image that she was breaking into the music industry with. In fact, there's a part at the end of this song where they just like randomly bleep out something, and she's like, I didn't even curse. I didn't even curse. I don't even curse. And T-Pain is like, she doesn't even curse. And they're just like bleeping things out everywhere. And so she did come in as this role model for young girls, this really clean image. And in some ways, by participating in something like this, even though it was definitely a joke, it kind of reinforced that.
Yeah, and I mean to how do we know it's a parody is you just go into the lyrics. I'm so gangsta, you can find me baking cookies at night. You know, like that's the parody of it. Like you would take a sincere song would not end with I'm baking cookies at night. We know that, but the flipping of it, like you were saying with the Charlie Chaplin, having it with another person, so it's who's clearly in on the joke. There's not real appropriation happening. Twisting the lyrics, all that stuff is like kind of how it comes together as this ridiculous, humorous thing. And I mean, I'm sure people still thought it was weird and like was a flop because we like hating people as a society, I guess. But all the elements are there to be like, no, this is clearly a joke. And one she was in on. That's another thing with the benign violation too, is if there's something that's funny, but the other person's not in on it, it's actually, that's when a lot of people are like, that's not funny. They're not in on it. Like she was clearly in on it. T-Pain was in on it. And that's very key.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Well, speaking of being in on the joke, I have the second song, which is the SNL Monologue from 2009, affectionately titled Monologue Song, in parentheses, La La La. We talked about SNL when we did our satire episode because SNL does a lot of humor, satire, parody. So I definitely recommend going back and listening to that episode. It was also just a really fun one. But the first thing to note about this is that Taylor wrote this entire monologue on her own. And in fact, she was the first person to ever write their own SNL monologue at the time. So Seth Meyers actually commented on this in 2023 on the Howard Stern show. He said, she came to us and said, quote, I wrote a song for the opening monologue. So we brought Taylor into Lauren's office and she sings this song, which is not only a beautiful song by a beautiful singer, it's a perfect SNL monologue fully formed. To this day, I've never had a moment like that where someone brings you a fully gift wrapped present and it's exactly what you need it to be. When she finished, I should have said, now, Taylor, just for you, I want to look at you and read what we had written for you, just so you know how much effing worse our pitch was. So I just love this because not only does it give Taylor credit where credit is very much due, that she is a songwriter and writes her own songs, but she also is funny and humorous and understands the tone that a monologue is supposed to have at SNL. And I was thinking about like what actually makes a good SNL monologue. It's some self-deprecating humor, showcasing your personality, but also doing something a little bit unexpected, maybe tongue in cheek, maybe poking fun at yourself. So Ryan Gosling, very, tied to this episode, did an All Too Well parody about the Barbie movie. Steve Martin and Martin Short did eulogies for each other. That's actually supposed to be one of the best SNL monologues ever, the Steve Martin and Martin Short one. So I recommend going and checking it
I
out.
love them so much
They're
together.
just two fabulous humans. But I went through a lot of articles on like the top 10 SNL monologues ever, and that one is a favorite.
Total side note, but still related to the world of Taylor Swift. The fact that they got the chemistry between Selena Gomez, Steve Martin, and Martin Short for Only Murders in the
It's
Building,
perfect.
in so many roles that would have been weird, and they found the
No,
perfect
it's
chemistry where you
perfect.
love them.
It works, and that
And
is
just,
absolutely Taylor related.
it is the ideal trio.
So going back to what Jen kicked us off with, which is about the article on humor, it's about violating the norms of articulating clearly, what people find critical or controversial about you. That's what this monologue does so well. I'm just gonna read a couple of lines from this. So first verse, just for example. I like glitter and sparkly dresses, but I'm not going to talk about that in my monologue. I like baking and things that smell like winter, but I'm not going to talk about that in my monologue. And then the chorus. The chorus is literally just la la la, la la la, la la la. Like that's it. So not only here is she making fun of herself and how she was characterized or criticized at the time. I like glitter and sparkly dresses. Remember, 2009. So she had just released, she was in the middle of promotion and touring for Fearless. That was her sparkly dress era. Her baking era. If I go on within the verses, she also says things like, I like writing songs about douchebags who cheat on me. I like writing their names into songs so they're ashamed to go in public. right? This was the time where she was very much criticized for writing breakup songs and putting, people into her songs. Who might she put into her songs? You might think I'd bring up Joe, the guy who broke up with me on the phone. So here she is very directly calling out. I don't know if it was rumors because I think she addressed it directly, who the Joe Jonas situation on the Ellen show very famously, but she is literally putting it directly in everybody's face, violating the norms, which we would think is her not addressing the criticism, not addressing what people say about her. I was going to say behind her back, but really in the tabloids, it's not behind her back. She's a celebrity. They're saying it front and center. And she's saying it, but then she says, but I'm not going to talk about that in my monologue. But she is.
Right. Like, bring it up, but no comment. But
No comment. And the other part that the article that Jen mentioned talks about humor, one of the other elements of humor is that it allows you to release this nervous energy by directly addressing what people criticize, the theory of release. And that's also what this song does. So instead of, if we think about back to the Seth Meyers quote, where they usually write a monologue for somebody. So that means that they're looking at what happens in a celebrity's life and saying, here are the things we think you should poke fun of. Here's how we think you should bring a little levity here. But she did that. She was the one that brought to the table all of the things that people criticize her for, that people poke fun at her for. And that lets out this nervous energy of, ooh, is she going to get mad that we're talking about her exes and we're talking about how she sings about her exes? That's off the table because she is the one bringing it up. She's the one singing about it. And she is the one who wrote about it first. Nobody had to come to her and say, is it okay if you make fun of yourself by talking about how you write songs about ex-boyfriends? She's bringing it up first. So she's also owning it and reclaiming that narrative. And that's very powerful as well, which I don't think we really think about when you think about monologue song, the power and the ownership in that, but that's really what she was doing, is saying, you can't make fun of me because I'm owning this. I own this narrative.
Yeah, there's so much power in humor to break the tension, to say things that you couldn't say seriously. I also, when I was trying to think of examples, was thinking of court jesters, which you even get, think about in a devastating play, King Lear. It's the fool who says the most truthful things, but
Yes,
because he's the fool,
always.
it's funny, he can break the tension. Court jesters were known for being the ones who could insult the king and queen, who could do terrible things, but because they were the jester, they were the comedian, they were in this position that kind of existed outside of social norms a little bit. There's a lot of power in taking that position and saying, I'm going to speak the truth, but in a funny way so people aren't as mad about it. But the comedians are still often speaking some of the biggest truths. They just do it in a way that will receive it a little bit better.
I was just going to say, there's been so much controversy over the last few years on what comedians do and don't say across different platforms. People will get very upset by some of the things that comedians say. And there's this question of whether comedians deserve the kind of autonomy to be able to say whatever they want and get away with it, because that's kind of what humor is. Or is there a line? And if there is, where does that line get drawn? And I think that's been a hot topic that we haven't totally figured it out, but that's the line that comedians often toe with humor. It's just pushing people a little bit to try to speak the truth. When I look at this video of Taylor, I'm so impressed because she is so young. She was 20. And especially now that we know her as the megastar that she is, so confident, so perfectly not calculated, but so in control of everything. Going back and watching this video, she does seem so unpolished comparatively, and so timid and shy and nervous in many ways. And yet she clearly is in perfect control. She came in knowing what she wanted to do. She delivered it flawlessly, even with such little experience in the industry at that time. From the very, very beginning, she's always been in total control, just lending itself to the mindedness of it all. And one thing that I realized as you were talking, Jody, was the baking cookies was also in my song. which Jen
Yes.
brought up.
It's
And
it's
so,
not in mine. I'm so sorry.
Ugh.
well, I'm like so early on, not only was she building her own image of her work professionally, but she was also kind of manipulating her image of her personal life. Like, what is her personal brand and what's her professional brand? And I think even now, we have this thing where we all think we know her so well, but we actually only know what she gives us. And she's given us a handful of things like, I like to bake cookies. I love cats and I love my cats. These are things that she has crafted as a part of her personal persona and given to us from the very start. And I think that I just thought that was really interesting that she reinforces it through these mediums.
Yeah, parasocial relationships are weird.
They're very weird. The last thing I'll say is, of course, the bridge of this very self aware song says, you might, and we love a bridge, you might be expecting me to say something bad about Kanye and how he ran up on the stage and ruined my VMA monologue. But there's nothing more to say because everything's okay. I've got security lining the stage. This is my SNL monologue.
Side note, the rhyme scheme of that is out of control. That is incredible.
It took me a while to figure out how I even say that moderately correctly. So yes,
Wow.
chef's kiss. And this was her SNL monologue, okay? Some of those monologues are just like whatever, get on with the show. This was perfection. Not only as Taylor Swift and perfectly on brand that she wrote it. Again, this was probably when she was writing Speak Now, which was all fully authored by her. She wrote everything with no co-writers. That was another criticism that she was getting at this time, that she didn't really write her own songs. So what does she do? Writes her own SNL monologue. She fully owns the criticism, the critiques, the gossip, the rumors about her. She owns, the criticism, or kind of perverts or, parodies the criticism about her songs that they're basic, because the chorus of this whole monologue song is la la la, la la la. This is my musical monologue, right? So she's parodying herself, just doing it so beautifully. And I think this is just such a great, smart, ingenious, and fun way to use humor. And she also perfectly understood the assignment of SNL. So really hard to top this one. But Jen might try.
I really love that it is that very poppy, girly sound. And then she's saying things about like the douchebags and
Hmm.
calling out cheaters. And it's like to the unexpected element of humor,
Yeah.
too. That kind of bait and switch you would hear in the music and you'd be like, oh, this is fun. And it kind of does start out fun. And then we get more and more of like, and screw you, and screw you, and screw you. And you're like, okay, all right. All right. Well, before I get into mine, one thing that, as you were saying, Monzi, about just like comedians, I wanted to make one recommendation. If you have never watched Hannah Gadsby's special Nanette on Netflix, it's an incredible special where she does the first half is jokes and then she kind of goes back and deconstructs them. So if that's something you're like, oh, that is an interesting question of like how does humor and where the line is, I think it's just an incredible special. I highly recommend it. But just wanted to throw that out there.
I also have a book recommendation. It's called Comedy Book: How Comedy Conquered Culture, and it kind of goes through the history of comedy. Very good. Highly recommend.
Okay, well, I'm wrapping us up with yet another SNL. Taylor's not in this one as much, but her performance, her part of it is very key. It is the Three Sad Virgins sketch, which came out in 2021. Still one of my favorite sketches of all time. I love the Please Don't Destroy guys. And it was written by them, so Please Don't Destroy, who is Ben Marshall, John Higgins, and Martin Hurley, and also written by Dan Bola. And the premise of this, so 2021, the premise of this video is it starts out with the Please Don't Destroy guys they make consistent videos, kind of poking fun at themselves, being like nerds, not good with girls, that kind of stuff. And Pete Davidson walks in and is like, hey, I really want to do a video with you guys. And this is 2021, so very like peak Pete Davidson, like he's, like constantly being shown with like the hottest models and everyone's like, why are women into this man? And I want to be like, someone being fun is more important than them being super hot, but whatever, that's fine. Men, you're not ready for that conversation. Anyways. It's fine. So Pete walks in and he's like, hey, I want to do videos with you guys. And it's very much playing on this idea of like the cool guy in high school and the nerds, and the cool guy's like, hey, I want to hang out. And the nerds are like, anything for you, anything you want, I'm in. Like, I want to be associated with you. And the song starts out and it's a very like hot, confident club song. Pete Davidson's rapping. And then when it turns to the Please Don't Destroy guys, they're immediately described as three sad virgins. And it kind of continues like that. I watched it so many times prepping for this, and I was like, it's still funny every single time.
Funny.
It's so funny. So they'll do like a chorus, and then it's like stops. They're on set, and they're like, I don't know, Pete, whatever. And they're like, but whatever you want. And then they do it again. And finally, like, we can't do this. We cannot do this anymore. Pete's like, dude, I totally get it. Right after the bridge. And then Taylor Swift walks up. So it's playing on her bridges, being like the most devastating possible songwriting. And all the Please Don't Destroy guys are like, no, no, no. And then immediately cuts to the song going. And so Taylor Swift's part is very sensual sounding music. Like it'd be like that hook, that bridge in a club song where like everything gets really like smooth and sultry. And she's singing things about how Ben looks like a sad Ron Weasley and a big bird who lost his feathers, how Martin has the charm and sex appeal of a scarecrow, and John has a big ass bowling ball head, and none of them had the guts to take their shirts off in front of a girl, to which the last one they all go, okay, yeah, no, that one's fair. And then she starts singing the Three Sad Virgins, but in a like kind of a hook way, in her own way. And towards the end, it cuts to all the guys and they're kind of mad, but then they kind of start getting into it because it's still like it's a really catchy song. It's a really funny song, but it's doing that benign violation. We know it's SNL. We know Please Don't Destroy guys helped write it. We know they're part of it. Like this would be a brutal song if like they truly had no idea what they were getting into. Obviously, they're on the joke, and it's that bait and switch. It's this really like hot, like music, like a club. You could get into it, and the lyrics are things like a sad Ron Weasley, which is an incredible line. It's one of my favorite SNL sketches.
The pinned comment on YouTube is Pete Davidson and Taylor Swift together is Kanye's worst nightmare.
I also love the song because it made me want more Taylor Swift features. She just doesn't do this in music. She's a very much like, I'm the main girl. This is my song. She has other people who feature on her songs frequently, but it's pretty rare to see her as a feature. And the way that she came into this super random song and said the funniest things, but in the most serious way, is just incredible. Like she was in character 100% of the time, and it was honestly awesome.
Yeah, when she does like the big ass bowling ball line, she like has her head and she like rolls it around, which is like kind of a sincere dance move, and she's 100% serious, but she's singing big ass bowling ball head. It's so funny.
She gets into it the same way she gets into all of her performances, which is what you need to do to really land this type of material. Like she has to be completely play it straight, and she does, and it's amazing. I just want more Taylor on SNL. I think this was, other than her 2023 like introducing Ice Spice, she hasn't been on SNL since 2021, and I think we're long overdue. But I want her to be in the sketches.
Yeah.
The other sketch, she wasn't in it enough to do it for this, but I think it was also in 2009, or maybe it was, I don't know the date. Maybe it was 2011, where she plays Little Orphan Annie in a Broadway sketch.
Yes.
She has like one line. She's great when she is poking fun at herself, when she is in these very humorous situations. SNL is like the perfect place for her.
This is generally great comedic timing, but then real commitment to being in character, because I feel like when I think of Pete Davidson, I think about him breaking character a lot, and he'll just burst out giggling, and you can tell everyone's having a good time, and it's really funny. But or you think of like Ryan Gosling, who literally,
oh my god, the best.
He's just like
the best.
Whenever he does like the alien abduction sketches with Kate McKinnon, he's just like you just don't see his face. He can't do it.
But Taylor just like deadpan serious in the
she
role,
commits to the bit
and will not break character, which is so much funnier. Just really great.
And it's really funny to compare the two SNL because there's an 11-year time jump between them. So Taylor Swift making fun of herself in 2009 was a very poppy, sweet music. And then in 2021, it's a very like, she's like dancing up on them a little bit. Like it's a very kind of sexy. It's very kind of sensual. but she's singing some of the most absurd, hilarious things. It's just, which is like a normal maturity, like for sure, comparing a teenager to someone in her early 30s. But it's a really funny comparison of like, as she has grown up, as her image has grown up, she's still figured out like, how can I cut to the core? What would be funny? Oh, I'll come for the bridge, and we'll make that the most emotionally devastating. There's so much self-awareness in that. How her music style has changed, and she plays with that. That like she didn't do the same thing. She did two drastically different things, but they both feel very core to who she is. And in both of them, she's doing that subversion again of here's what you expect from me, and now I'm going to flip it on its head, and now it's really funny. And that's like really talented to be able to do that 11 years apart in such an authentic, true to yourself way.
Yeah, and her confidence just goes out the roof in the second one. I think that's where you really see a difference in just how she shows up. She was great the first time around too, but you can really see her coming into her own in that second one.
Since this is a show about humor, I'm trying to think through like what other of her actual songs are humorous.
This is why we can't have nice things. It's
Yeah,
definitely
for
humorous.
sure.
Yeah, always picture her just wagging her finger at that one.
Yeah. And I forgot that you existed.
I forgot that you existed. Yeah, I think there's humorous moments in songs like the bridge and "Shake It Off."
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely.
There's a lot of moments where she just giggles in her.
Yeah.
She'll use the laugh as a part of the song to break the tension a little bit, especially when it's serious. I think there's been a few times where it's like a really sad song and then she'll just kind of laugh.
Mm. You Need to Calm Down has a lot of humor in it because
Yeah.
it's poking
it
fun
does.
of the other of society. I think these are 3 examples of using humor in a very specific way. A lot of parody, a lot of satire, like, and poking fun at herself, which is not what we see in her actual music. It's using humor not to poke fun at herself, but to poke fun
Yeah.
of other situations, which
Yeah,
makes sense.
and it's not the chorus. She's not Bo Burnham, who is
She's not Weird Al, like, this
yeah,
is
not a musical
Yeah.
comedian. Like that's not the main
For
part
sure.
of it. But she's playing with her skills
For
for
sure.
sure in different ways with different audiences and different contexts.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed when she did host because that was the one where she also had the sketch where she was I forget who the actress was, but she was the roommate with the actress and
Yes.
the roommate's dating Andy Samberg, and they have all these inside jokes, and they're like, oh, I don't want to be with anyone other than you. Like, I don't want to hang out with anyone right now. And Andy Samberg's like, okay. Like, that's a 10 out of 10 sketch.
She also did Ew with Jimmy
Yes.
Fallon
Mm-hmm.
on his show. Like, that was fabulous. So, yeah, she's good at this.
She's hilarious.
She's
just
real
as a
funny.
human.
Yeah.
She's real funny.
One of my favorite humorous moments, which I don't think was intentional, was on Jimmy Fallon when the Roots will play a song and they have to guess it, and she gets every single one of them, and
Except
she
for her
doesn't
own.
get shaken.
Except for like the most popular song of hers ever.
I still doubt the authenticity of that clip. I'm like, there's no way she didn't get that. But she does such a good job acting shocked that it's hard to tell. It's one of the great mysteries in my life is that did she really not get that?
I feel like she's at least comes off competitive enough that she wanted to win more than anything, and her brain was just racking through like, what are the songs I
Not
know?
expecting her own song.
Not what are the songs I sing.
There was a moment like that on the Kelly Clarkson show too, when Anne Hathaway sings her song, and Kelly Clarkson just like falls to the floor.
It's since you've been gone, and she doesn't get it.
And they just
So I think that like I would imagine they're not thinking their own songs; they're thinking like other songs, or if it's your own song and such a big hit, I don't know, maybe it's like you don't even hear it anymore. You just tune it out.
My favorite comedy funny story is when Jimmy Fallon got the tapes of her wisdom teeth removal.
Oh my God.
And played it
because her mom is, in the best way possible, a monster in the way that mom should be, where they're like, this is hilarious and I'm doing this to you.
My mind is alive.
I love that video so much. She just looks so mortified.
Do we think Cats was meant to be humor? Sorry, was that wrong to bring up?
I mean, Cats is supposed to have humor. It was not meant to be humorous in the way it ended up being
That's
humorous.
for sure.
Believed in that movie.
I respected that. While everyone else separated herself from it, she was like, you know what? I had the time of my life making it. And
She's
I
like,
stand by that. And I'm like, you know what?
Yeah,
Good for you.
I appreciate that. Really take ownership of that.
Also, for the record, I never remember what I say on this podcast, but I remember like everything you guys say. So I do think that that's reasonable because I don't listen to myself.
Well,
Get back.
tune in next week as we deep dive into another episode of AP Taylor Swift.
Oh yeah, we're not deep diving into
Oh,
new
just
songs.
kidding.
We didn't
Join
say
us-
that, just to be clear.
Join us next week for another episode of AP Taylor Swift. Just replace it.
We can't laugh at a humor episode.
Chaotic ending's appropriate
I
for
think
a
it makes
humor
sense.
episode.
All right. I'm going to hit stop now. That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on your social channel of choice at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.